7 years since the historic Brexit vote. How do you think Brexit is going?
On one level, constitutionally, massive success. We've completely reversed the status quo. That was always the biggest battle. It wasn't that people loved the European Union. In fact, the truth is very, very few did. But reversing status quo in anything in a democratic society is incredibly hard. We've done it, and we've succeeded with that. I think in terms of Britain's standing in the world, we are definitely standing taller. I think the AUKUS deal, I think leadership over Ukraine, whether you agree with the position or not, show we are standing taller, free of an EU foreign policy. I think the City of London has not been the catastrophe that people said it would be. There are more people now in financial services than there were before. But, and this is the key, why did we win the referendum? We won it because the turnout was 10% higher than anyone thought it would be. And why was that? One overriding question, and that was the population explosion that had happened in Britain between 1997 and 2016, when the referendum took place. On that, we failed people dismally. Net migration is now 2.5 to 3 times higher than it was before Brexit, and that's the legal bit. On the illegal bit, what I saw in 2015 was the EU putting in place its refugee policy, which meant anybody that crossed the Med and set foot on EU soil was allowed to stay. People see what's happening in the English Channel as being a complete and utter failure. So number one, on the issue that got us over the line, people feel completely and utterly let down and say to me, what's the point? That was a deliverable. The other big deliverable was if you go to small businesses, sole traders, white van man, call people, all these derogatory terms that are used about these people, but the real strivers in the country, they were overwhelming Brexit voters. And they thought by leaving the EU, their lives would become easier. Whether it's regulation, whether it's the authorities bearing down upon them. And you know what, 7 years on, for many of them, it's actually worse. It seems a complete perversion that freed of the EU, not only have we not got rid of EU laws that were burdens upon their lives, our own authorities in many areas have made life even tougher. And that's why 37% of people that voted Brexit say they're disappointed with the result. I'll be frank, I'm one of them.
What needs to be done to make people believe in Brexit again?
Well, it has to actually fulfil the promises. And if you vote for something, and yes, of course, there's a constitutional argument, and that's very, very important. There's a sovereignty argument. It's very, very important. I mean, how many times over the years did I joke that leaving the European Union was about regaining the birthright to mismanage our own country? Well, arguably, we're doing that quite well. But for lots of people out there who are not especially political, they saw deregulation, reduced numbers coming into Britain as the two deliverables. So we need a government that says they're going to do these things that now people believe. And the problem is this. When you go to that 37%, 75% of them lay their feelings of failure on Brexit directly at the door of the Conservative government. And that's the biggest problem we face, that whatever the Tories say at the next election, many people won't believe them.
Do you think there is a real and present danger that we will just continue to creep back closer towards the EU?
Well, in many areas, we haven't really left at all. We haven't diverged, and that makes it incredibly easy for the Labour Party to effectively sign us straight back up to single market rules. Are Labour going to take us back into membership of the European Union? No. Just not going to happen, certainly not in the next 4 to 5 years. They wouldn't even try to do it. They'd be mad to take that battle on because, of course, the cost of rejoining would be huge. Signing a humiliating treaty, committing to joining the euro, things like that. But we're headed on a path now where it really will be Brino, Brexit in name only. So we have to try and make people realise that they were right to vote for us to be self-governing. They were right to think that with those powers, there were things we could do that would make the lives of millions of people easier. But, and here's the problem we've got, what do we do at the next election? It's up to those of us who had a vision a long time ago, in my case a very, very long time ago, We have to try and recreate that vision of what we could and should be doing as an independent country.
And people would say to you, well, Nigel, when you advocated leaving the European Union, you didn't lay out a plan. People didn't know what they were voting for, what kind of Brexit we were going to get. How would you respond to that?
We didn't know what kind of Remain we were going to get. I mean, had we voted Remain, who's to say what legislation would have come in? I mean, you could never completely predict what will happen. But, I didn't make false promises. All I ever said was we'd be self-governing. But I did believe that in terms of deregulation and reducing numbers coming into Britain, I genuinely believed they were the cells that the British public would buy. And they did. They did. And I tried to want to believe that Boris Johnson's government in the end of that year of 2019 would deliver some of it. They've delivered almost nothing. And I remember the day after the referendum saying to people, the trouble is we've won this enormous victory against the establishment, but the very people I felt that I'd fought for 25 years were still in charge. And even in 2019, when the Conservative Party faced extinction after that European election, the Brexit Party's formed, it leaps out like a jack in the box, it wins the poll. In June of that year, for 4 consecutive weeks in the Sunday Times, it's topping the national polls for the next general election. And of course they go for Boris, a series of promises get made, but the truth is, they never really believed in it.
What do you think needs to happen now to continue to build upon the fact that we've got our own sovereignty, the fact we can take control of our own affairs? Is it about getting rid of the Northern Ireland Protocol? Is it scrapping the TCA? Is it changing the withdrawal agreement?
I think what people need to feel is that whatever we do, we are genuinely putting the interests of our own people first and putting the interests of Brexit voters first. This was a massive democratic mandate, the biggest election ever fought in the history of these islands. We have to start giving people the deliverables that they voted for. Now, we will go on making the arguments that these are the things that should be done in terms of becoming more competitive, not being tied to single market rules, and we'll go on making those arguments, but it's getting harder for us. It's getting harder for us as the Tories' failure on all of these things become clear. So I can't sit here and pretend that the next few years are going to be easy, because they're not. But the idea, ultimately, that no free people ever willingly give up the right to govern themselves, that still is absolutely crystal clear in my mind. And the other thing, you know what we haven't done? We haven't actually talked about Europe at all. Nobody has talked about the massive problems that are going on within the European Union. Our economy may be in difficulty right now. The EU is in, and the Eurozone is in recession. There are massive conflicts within the EU between North and South and East and West. I'm confident that we're not going to rejoin. I just don't see that happening. I think the problems in Brussels are massive. The cost of re-entry would be huge. I'm confident of that. What I'm less confident about is how we get a government that achieves the benefits.
And finally, if you could give a message to people watching this who voted to leave, or perhaps they voted to remain, and are looking at the situation right now and thinking, well, what was it all for? Why should I still believe? What would you say to them?
Oh, it was the right thing to do. I mean, historically, it was the right thing to do. Regaining sovereignty, regaining independence, regaining the power that the vote gives you to hire and fire those that directly affect your lives, all of that was absolutely the right thing to do. Of that, I've got no question. Of that, I just don't see there's a debate. I mean, the Remainers don't argue we should give away sovereignty. The Remainers don't argue we should become a province of the United States of Europe. The Remainers just argue that economically, somehow we're better off, and of course the corporates back up these arguments, by being part of this thing. The Remainers argue that it's been a negative, it's been a disaster at every level. It hasn't. It's not that it's been a disaster, it's that we haven't taken the opportunities, and that's really the problem.